In May 2025, the world watched with bated breath as Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso made an unexpected and symbolic appearance in Moscow. Behind the carefully staged optics and ceremonial protocols was a far more intricate and strategic operation, one that had been in the making for months, carried out with precision and secrecy. This wasn't just a diplomatic visit. This was a calculated chess move in a new geopolitical order.
Aware that we are no longer in a war on terrorism, but in a war of independence. Everyone must understand that it is a strategy for the imperialists to impose this war on us. Normally, every leader, every ruler should fight for their country. It's a strategy. They fight for their interests, and we must also fight for our interests. If we manage to develop, to prosper, it means that over there, they will not be able to develop. They will have to regress. If we manage to transform our raw materials tomorrow, it means that over there, factories will close. Do you understand the logic? So it's normal that they fight to disrupt our society, to keep it in this constant war, so that we can never think about developing one day. And then they will continue to develop, while we will still be here exporting our raw materials to them and our youth, suffering in poverty, trying to cross the ocean, to go beg over there.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré is no ordinary leader. Born in 1988, trained in the Burkina Faso Armed Forces, and educated in military engineering, he emerged as a revolutionary leader after leading a coup in September 2022. His ascent to power was not only the result of internal instability but of widespread dissatisfaction with the post-colonial order that still governed much of Africa's international dealings. Within his first year, Traoré had taken bold moves, expelling French troops, cutting military ties with the West, and embracing African sovereignty in both language and policy. He banned NGOs accused of meddling in domestic politics, restricted foreign media operations, and laid the groundwork for a new security doctrine that relied on regional cooperation and strategic partnerships outside the traditional Western sphere.
Ibrahim Traoré is the revolutionary archetype of the 21st century. He was forged in the reality of Western-backed insurgency and Western economic warfare and propaganda. Because, today the fight for freedom is not just waged by armies anymore, but by narratives and by resource policies and by alliances and by collective sovereignty. Traoré has made the choice to look towards Russia and Turkey and towards other new centers of power in the multipolar world. And that's strategic. Not because they're perfect allies, but because he recognizes the necessity of breaking the Western stranglehold on Burkina Faso.
In this context, an invitation to the Kremlin's Victory Day parade wasn't just ceremonial, it was deeply symbolic. It represented Russia recognizing Traoré not just as a regional figure, but as a future continental voice. To underscore the importance of this visit, Vladimir Putin authorized the dispatch of his own presidential aircraft, the Ilyushin Illinois 96-300 PU, to transport Captain Traoré. Not a common courtesy, but a calculated gesture loaded with diplomatic symbolism. This aircraft is more than just a flying machine. It's a fortress in the skies, equipped with advanced radar jamming technologies, missile countermeasure systems, and encrypted communications. Typically reserved for the Russian president, the deployment of this aircraft sends a clear signal. The Kremlin regards Traoré as a strategic partner, not a mere guest. Airspace negotiations, coordinated escorts, security clearances across multiple sovereign territories. This was not just a flight, it was a geopolitical ballet. Every mile flown had been pre-cleared by military command centers, and radar stations across continents had eyes on a single aircraft, the Russian presidential jet. It was one of the most logistically intricate flights conducted by the Russian presidency in recent memory, a mission woven through a patchwork of alliances, suspicions, and silent agreements. But even at 35,000 feet, diplomacy did not pause. Inside the aircraft, high-level officials were already deep into discussions. Defense cooperation was on the table, energy contracts were being drafted, and a framework for long-term strategic trade was in the works. Intelligence chiefs, economic advisors, and military liaisons sat in hushed, intense conversations. This was not just transportation, this was a mobile war room.
Beautiful.
The moment Captain Traoré's jet touched down at Vnukovo International Airport, Moscow entered an elevated security phase. It was Victory Day week, already a period of heightened alert. But with over a dozen international leaders flying in, including controversial allies of Russia, the Russian capital became a fortress. Russian Spetsnaz operatives were deployed across metro stations. Snipers took position atop historic buildings. Drones equipped with facial recognition software scanned the skies and streets. Roads were cleared for motorcades, and communication networks were partially encrypted to prevent cyber interference.
We are on Red Square in the heart of the Russian capital, where today a military parade was held in honor of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. It was the Red Army that made a decisive contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany. And today, the descendants of the soldiers who crushed Nazism, including the participants of the special military operation in Ukraine, marched along the Kremlin walls. Continuity was also maintained in the demonstration of military equipment. The column was traditionally led by the legendary Soviet T-34 tanks. However, the new equipment in service with the Russian army was also on display. For example, unmanned systems. In particular, you could see the Gerantu kamikaze drones, which have become one of the main workhorses in the special military operations zone. In addition, the spectators could see the components of the Russian nuclear triad. There was also an aerial part of the parade, thanks to which the sky over Red Square was painted in the colors of the Russian flag. Military units from countries friendly to Russia also marched along the cobblestones of Red Square, both from the republics of the former Soviet Union and from other countries such as China and Egypt. Leaders from some 30 countries watched the parade from the stands, along with President Vladimir Putin. Among them were the leaders of China, Brazil, Venezuela, Cuba, Egypt, and many others.
While the media focused on the pomp and ceremony of the parade, the real story was unfolding in the marble corridors of the Kremlin. Discussions between Captain Traoré and Russian officials spanned over 36 hours. Among the topics discussed, deployment of Russian advisors to Burkina Faso, a 10-year arms deal involving helicopters and anti-drone systems, access to Russian satellite data to monitor terrorist movements, and the construction of an advanced cybersecurity center in Ouagadougou. The world's cameras zoomed in on the iconic Red Square. For many, the display of tanks and bombers was routine. But what stood out was the seating arrangement. World leaders don't just sit anywhere. They are placed, carefully, symbolically. Traoré sat in the front row, flanked by anti-Western allies and Eurasian Economic Bloc members. The signal was unmistakable: Africa's revolutionaries are now central to the anti-unipolar world narrative.
Наши отцы, деды и прадеды спасли Отечество и завещали нам защищать Родину. Слава народу-победителю! С праздником! С Днем Великой Победы! Ура!
Following the parade, a joint military band played the Burkina Faso anthem, a first in Victory Day history. The Kremlin's public gesture did not go unnoticed.
Être ici aujourd'hui, c'est célébrer avec nos amis de la Fédération de Russie la victoire sur le nazisme en 1945.
Ваш нынешний визит в Россию на празднование 80-летия Победы весьма символичен и отражает дружественный характер российско-буркинийских отношений. Хотел бы вспомнить также и о вкладе вашей страны в разгром германского нацизма и его сателлитов. Около 30 тысяч жителей нынешней Буркина-Фасо воевали в составе войск антигитлеровской коалиции. В формированиях сражающаяся Франция под руководством легендарного сына французского народа генерала Шарля де Голля.
Beyond the optics, concrete steps were taken to embed Russian presence deeper into Burkina Faso's framework. Over 40 bilateral documents were signed. Joint intelligence sharing protocols, military base development, student exchange programs in nuclear physics, and perhaps most intriguingly, talks about Burkina Faso joining the BRICS Plus Forum. BRICS analyst. This wasn't just a diplomatic visit. This was onboarding into a parallel system of global governance. Financial, technological, military, all rewired away from Western structures. The discussions included financial restructuring, introducing mere payment systems, ditching the CFA franc, and exploring a Burkina Faso-Russia gold-backed trade token, a direct challenge to the dollar's influence in West Africa. When Captain Traoré returned, it wasn't as a guest of Russia. It was as a statesman of a rising, realigned Africa. His visit had inspired headlines, sparked debate, and shifted alliances.
Aux impérialistes, de génération en génération, la transmission de tes convictions perpétue encore l'esprit de révolution. Sankara, les enfants chantent Tomo Sankara, Tomo Sankara, n'est plus là mais l'esprit Sankara est là. Tomo Sankara,
Traoré's Moscow mission planted the seeds of a new order. Whether that order will bloom peacefully or spark further tensions, only time will tell. This was more than a flight. More than a parade. This was a recalibration. Africa is no longer content to be the passive recipient of global narratives. With leaders like Traoré forging new paths, the continent is beginning to write its own chapter in the 21st century. If you found this story compelling, like, subscribe, and comment below. What do you think this new alliance means for the future of Africa? Let's talk about it.